Hey, how's everybody doing? This is George with Truck Driver Nation. So, what I want to go over is going to be, when because I've been covering more about freight, how I do things, um, and I don't want to make it so complex. You start to say, well, shit, this is one level of stuff. Here's another level of stuff. But the one thing that, and it depends on how you're actually working it. Two things I want you to emphasize. Shorter loads pay better than longer loads. Everybody knows that. The other thing is, instead of just doing short loads, also make convert those to from basically going from taking a limited truckload, that's a less than a truckload, LTLs we call it, and basically you overall build a full truckload. It's just like we do in car hauling. Um, obviously I did do it. One I was actually doing step deck, and that's the main one that I know how to do with ease because I know all the indications. Like if it has something on there, instead of me having to take everything off, do we have a forklift there? Can we pull it off? Some of those things do help, but sometimes you got to take things off. And if it's solid freight sitting on the bed, then you're going to have a hard time moving it. So you don't want to corner your freight up. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this. This is going to be, it's not an all inclusive, but it's basically taking a less than truckload, you're building your full truckload. And then as you drop off those drops at those given locations, you're continually looking for new freight to slide into that spot based on that footage. Does it work all the time? No. But as I'm going to show you, the overall rate is it's over. I mean, it's over 50% more, sometimes more. Sometimes 100% load, I'm more. But you got to have you as a dispatcher, you got to learn to do this. Them as an owner operator, they may or may not ask you for this given skill set, but if you learn how to do this, then you're going to kill it. Okay. At the same time, you got to be careful because you don't want to actually commit yourself to this. And then you're not good at actually sourcing that freight because remember, the biggest thing you're going to be looking at this point is the drop times. Okay. We still have schedules, right? So, and you got to make sure the broker can work with that. I don't like really doing this for people that don't have a lot of experience at being a freight dispatcher. But since I have so many veteran truck drivers that are converting to be freight dispatchers, I'm going to include this and how to explain it, how it operates in fullness, in case you've never been exposed to it a lot, that this should bring your overall skill level up. Now, as we go through it, just make sure you understand this is broke down to more than one part. And so, so if you have questions and stuff, because this is one of these deals where I'm figuring I'm going to get a lot of questions on this one. But anyways, the LTL to FTL strategy, which is maximizing the gross revenue on the flatbeds and step decks, is where I'm beginning at. And we're going to get dry van and reefer in there as well. Now, the strategy of combining multiple, less than the truckload shipments to essentially create a full truckload is a sophisticated approach that can significantly maximize your gross revenue, especially on specialized equipment like the flatbeds and the step decks. Now, this goes far beyond simply just pulling a single straight load. It's about optimizing the space, the time, and the overall freight density, how much it weighs. Here's a detailed explanation and of this scenario, its effectiveness, and its applicable, and it's also applicable to dry van and reefer trailers as well. Now, the core concept, filling the deck with multiple LTLs. Traditional LTL carriers use hub and spoke models, consolidating freight at terminals. And as an independent carrier or dispatcher, you're leveraging a similar principle, but on a direct point to point basis. And there's what adds the more intricate, detailed point that you don't want to miss because you're literally going point to point, point to point. Okay. And you can easily do it with car hauling. I did it all the time with car hauling, but this is actual freight loads. Now, instead of waiting for one perfect FTL full truckload, you actively search for several smaller complementary loads that can be legally and safely transported together on a single trailer, ideally traveling in the same general direction. And it's not going to be in a straight line. But that being said, what you're making on the overall gross way exceeds doing an FTL, and you'll see here in just shortly. Now, the key is that each individual LTL shipment will likely pay a higher rate per linear foot or per pound than if they were part of a larger FTL shipment because they're just buying the whole trailer. Obviously, coming from the same origin to that destination on the FTL. By combining them, you accumulate these higher individual rates. Now, why this isn't ideal for the flatbeds and the step decks? Flatbeds and step decks are uniquely suited for this strategy due to one, the load and flexibility. They can be loaded from the top, the sides, the rear, making it easier to arrange diverse freight. You're going to need forklifts or some kind of ramp or whatever it's going to be to get that freight on there. But remember, you got to have it on the other side to get it off. Visibility of cargo. Now, unlike the enclosed trailers like dry van and reefer, you can visually inspect the cargo during transit and easily verify that your pickup, what you're picking up and dropping off. Now, diverse cargo, they often haul construction materials, machinery, oversized items, and specialized equipment that might not fill a full trailer, but are too large and awkwardly shaped for a standard dry van LTL services, less than truckload services. And that's what benefits you because remember, you can put anything in there. There ain't no walls. When will you have to flag it or anything? That's give or take, depending on the overall final end result. Now, here's a detailed scenario demonstrating this effectiveness. So let's imagine you got a 48-foot trailer. Okay, now remember they come in 53 foot. Some people say, "Oh, I have somebody says step deck didn't come in 53." I was like, "Well, obviously you're new to the game, but let's do on this one. We're going to use a 48-foot flatbed operating out of Atlanta, Georgia, and your driver needs to head toward obviously Houston, Texas. So that's basically coming out whichever way you want to go, run across 20, go all the way to 59, shoot down and hit 10 and run it on across. Um, but anyways, scenario one, you got a straight load. It's an FTL load, right? The load is about 40,000 pounds of steel coils from Atlanta to Houston, Texas. The rate is $2 per mile for the 800-mile trip, and you're getting $1,600 gross on that. Now, for me, I would actually argue this rate, try to get it up, but this is a scenario. Let's just keep it simple. You got one pickup, one drop off, relatively simple. Scenario two is we're actually going to take a less than truckload to convert it to a full truckload. And so you're building up to the maximum overall gross weight. It's not you're building up to that gross weight, but you're building up to where you don't exceed that gross rate. Now, instead of a single steel coil being loaded, you build opposite like a composite load. You know, it's composed of different pickups. So your first LTL pickup is going to be about 15,000 pounds of crated industrial valves. It occupies 12 foot of the deck space. So remember you're measuring. And it's going from Atlanta to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So that's obviously going to put that given route. So as I actually figure out this route, you can still do on this route right now, I could do 20 to 59 down to 10 and run across 12, which is going to run me right in the Baton Rouge. Obviously with this rate right here, they're offering $1,000. So that's effectively $83.33 per linear foot because we're measuring this by the foot of the overall 40 foot, 48 foot. We're using 48 foot that we have available. Now we're looking at load two, which is part of this LTO, less than truckload pickup. This one's going to weigh 8,000 pounds, a bag aggregate for a construction site, whatever aggregate it is. It can be sand, whatever it is. That's not relevant, but it occupies 8 foot of the deck space. Okay. So now you got to remember, you got 8 foot and you just used up 12 foot. Now you've got a total of 20 foot used up, not even half the trailer, right? So this is going from Atlanta to Lake Charles, Louisiana. So being in Lake Charles, then again, because you're going to drop down on 10, so right in the direction they're going toward Houston. So what we're going to do, that one right there is going to pay us $700, and that's going to be effectively $87.50 per linear foot. Now we've done used half the trailer, so we've got 20 foot covered. Now we're looking at load number 3. This is going to be a description that's 10,000 pounds of prefabricated metal stairs. It occupies. Now remember, when you're dealing with stuff, when you get there, I'm not saying this is going to turn out perfect because I've got stuff and they're like, well, yeah, it's this long, this wide, and it'd be some piece of shit steel they got welded on there. It sticks out further than that, and somebody didn't calculate it in. Because there's not a lot of geniuses sometimes when it comes to breaking out a measuring tape. But so this occupies 10 foot of the space of the deck space. So that brings us now to 30 foot. It's going from Atlanta, actually going all the way to the destination in Houston, Texas. This one pays $1,200 per mile, and this is basically paying $120 per linear foot for this given load going on there. So obviously your remaining space so far is going to be about 18 foot. Not bad, right? We've got 18 foot left. So what that's going to mean, if you look at the weight, we got 10,000. Let's look at the weight. That's 18,000 plus that 8. And then that original was 18 plus that 15. So 18 plus 15, I think is somewhere around 32,000 pounds, maybe 33,000 pounds. Sometimes my math, I think it's 33,000 pounds. So anyways, what we're going to look at now is, give me one second, let me get back where I was at. So we're going to do some math on this. So we got 48 foot total we had. So we're going to knock off the 12 foot, the 8 foot, and the 10 foot. So that left us with an 18 foot available. For the weight, we had 15 plus 18 plus 10, which did equal to 30,000 foot. And obviously that's well within the limited gross weight that most trucks can obviously carry without a problem. But always make sure weight distribution, you don't want to overweight your axles and then still have to be dealing with a problem. So make sure when you're telling them, obviously they should know, but tell them in general what position they can actually put these in. Now, when we're looking at the overall value, the total gross from an LTL where we built the less than truckload all the way up to a full truckload as we built it up, we had $1,000, we had $700, and we had $1,200. So the 1,000 was for the valves, the $700 for the aggregate. Those are going to the construction site, and then the 1,200 was for those stairs that were going over to Houston. So that actually brought the gross up from to $2,900. So comparison with that FTL load that was only paying $1,600 for one pick, one drop, which this is going to be 3 picks, 3 drops. Because you had 3 pickups, it's going to be three different stops. You actually built it up to $2,900. So you actually increased it by $1,300, which is an increase of 80% increase. Pretty damn awesome. But remember, you still got to remember the time sensitivity of how long it takes to pick up, drop off. Is it ready to go? Call ahead, make sure they are ready to go. And where they're going, they're ready. They know it's coming and they're ready to receive it. Okay. Now, why is it effective? Okay, so now you're looking at an 8% increase, which is really great. So now we're going to discuss why is it effective. And the reason why it's effective because you get premium for small shipments. Shippers often pay premium for the smaller dedicated service, especially if it bypasses traditional LTL terminals, which can be slower because they're basically cross-docking. Maximizing cube or linear foot utilization, you're getting paid for almost every foot of deck space rather than having to empty space behind a single load. That comes down to doing like let's say, for example, like a tri van or whatever. Reduced empty miles, you fully utilize the truck's capacity on a single directional run. So instead of well, the thing is, even if you pull something off during that route, if you got something that really loads quick, and ask them, does it load quick? Say, I've got a spot. I looked at it, I saw it. How quick can we get it loaded? Because I've got other deliveries to make. And so, because time utilization is everything we look at in the United States. So if you got something else to slide it in there, don't leave money sitting on the table. Diversify risk. Now, if one small load cancels or has a delay, you still have other freight on the truck. So you're not losing all your money and getting hung up because I can't get a load out of that given area. So you're not really deadheading, but if one of those cancels is not killing you. But I always stay on the boards. That's the reason it's so important to have a freight dispatcher. That's the reason you're providing the services that you can actually emphasize. The best thing about it, we already know we got an 80% increase. So by that, knowing the 2 loads, I already cleared you for what you would have made on the other load, a lot less weight, and it's still we got the space left. So if I can find something else, we'll fill it in. If you lose a portion of that less than truckload, and make sure to emphasize this. I know you hear me saying it. This is a key point. Okay, key point. Alert, alert. Okay, so targeting niche markets you can pick up from specialized LTL freight that might not fit into a standard LTL network, making the service more valuable. And you can actually charge more too. So if it don't fit in a standard truck, or they're saying, well, we can't accommodate that given freight, then there you are. You're in the door. Challenges and considerations, complexity and dispatch skills. These strategy requires a highly skilled dispatcher that obviously you need to locate suitable LTL freight based on what you're building. This often means going beyond basic load boards, network with direct shippers, or using specialized LTL freight platforms for flatbeds or step decks. Basically, it tells you what they are, how much they weigh, and what can be put in whichever spot. Now, precise scheduling, coordinate multiple pickup and drop off times. Delays at one stop impact subsequent ones. So make sure that's what I'm telling you when you're talking to the broker. Make sure to see how compact that given rate is and let them know, okay, we're putting this in an LTL format. So that way, if I need to call you to actually make a schedule adjustment, then but obviously, how quick will that be? How easy will that be ahead of time? Because you want to know, is this a customer you deal with a lot that has situations like this where it can fit into a LTL format instead of just being on FTL setup where it's a full truckload. Route optimization, plan the route logically to minimize backtracking and maximize efficiency. You don't want to you figure you go 40 miles one way, going back one way. Now that's 40 miles you've got to come back just to get to the point you're at where you drop that given freight. Weight distribution is crucial for safety and legality of flatbeds. You must ensure axle weights are correct with multiple different loads. So remember, drive axles and trailer axles. Make sure that you're not over the overall 34,000 pounds. Securing and tarping. Each load needs to be properly secured independently and potentially tarp, which is more labor intensive. It depends on what you're picking up. If you're on a step deck, for example, hell, that ain't nothing to it. You're already low to the ground. It's a lot different than being on a flatbed, but you do have to make sure you put that in consideration when you're actually loading the trucks. Whoever's driving the truck, hey, you have to tarp this load. You don't have to tarp this one, whatever it is. Just make it happen. Communication, you need constant communication with the driver and all shippers and receivers is paramount because there's different drops. Does it cost you more time on the phone? Yeah, but not substantial, unless there's something messing with the time frame of that given delivery. Out of those, let's say for the example used was 3 pickups, 3 drops. If anything happens, you need to contact which ones it's actually going to affect. And so they know, okay, it's going to be dragging behind a little bit. But also that goes in the same token other direction. Hey, we're getting there early. Can we get this freight off early? Can you get somebody out there? Let's get it off the truck so we can get our bill signed and keep on moving. Increased driver workload, more pickups and drops means there's more time spent loading and unloading, tarping and paperwork for the driver. This needs to be compensated fairly. But if you're making 80% more, I don't think you need to tell him nothing. He better get off his ass and make it happen because he's way exceeding the expectations. I know what if he had and of the overall gross rate of what most people are going to be doing at any given region for just doing an FTL. Potential for delays. More stops means more opportunities for delays at the shippers and receivers. Keep it in mind at all times. Legal and safety. Ensure that all combined loads comply with weight limits, dimensions, and securement regulations, as well as anything that has to do with hazmat, because certain stuff cannot be put on there with certain stuff because it may not be equipment. It might be pallets or something, bulk containers, something like that. So make sure if there's any conflict, because one chemical will be okay, and then another one will be a major catalyst for that given product. So make sure you keep that in mind. Now, as far as being able to apply this to drive-in and reefer trailers, while the principle of combining LTL is sound, its practical application differs significantly from drive-in and reefer trailers. For drive-in and reefer trailers. So drive-in trailers, feasibility, yes, it can be done, but it's specifically more challenging than flatbeds. And that's the reason I kept them separate when I did this, because obviously I know this because I wasn't trucking so long, but you need to keep that in mind when you're doing this freight. The loading and unloading, typically only rear door access, making it difficult. So you have to pull loads off, make sure they got enough dock space to pull it off and then reload stuff. And if they go to reload it, at that point, it's a great time to reload it. Depends on what all had to be taken off, especially if the load that they're getting is in the nose, they're going to pull everything off, put it in the sequence it needs to be right then and there. Unless there ain't enough dock space, then obviously just get it back on there. Freight mixing. Compatibility is key. You can't mix odorous goods with food products, or fragile items with heavy machinery unless properly separated. Same thing with the chemicals, hazmat. Space utilization is harder to efficiently cube out a dry van with diverse LTL freight compared to flatbed, where you can actually use linear footage and with more flexibility. You might end up with a significantly unusable space in between there. So keep that in mind. You don't want to lose space. They got to tighten them up, but it depends on how the freight's being secured and all that thing, dimension wise and all that. So keep that in mind. We used to see a lot of that problem with it. Give or take on how in depth you are with, if you're doing this all the time, at some point you're always going to cross a problem, some point in the path of actually running your truck as a LTL versus a FTL setup. Palletized freight, most dry van LTL, limited truckloads, less than truckloads is palletized, meaning you need sufficient pallets positions. So because it weighs, how much does each pallet weigh? How are you going to turn the pallets? Are you going double, single, double, all that good stuff. Driver workload is obviously you're doing actually even with the other one. You know what I mean? Yeah, unless they get off with the forklift, you still got to unstrap it. But in this instance, it's saying more frequent unstrapping and restrapping for internal goods that are inside of a closed trailer. Best use cases primarily for non-perishable, compatible, because they have to be compatible, palletized freight, often moving between distribution centers with loading and unloading assistance is obviously going to need to be available. Think a few pallets for one destination, then a few more for another, and all going broadly in the same direction. So you got to actually know which comes off, what goes back on, how it's going to stack, all that good stuff to obviously keep this in motion, but also decreasing the delays. All right, give me a second here. My voice is kind of getting jacked up. So on the weekend, I'm trying to get one of these videos put in that help everybody. So that was the basic concept behind dry van. Remember, dry van's a box. It's not refrigerated. You might have E-straps, all that in there, which make it easier for strapping and stuff. But those overall concepts of how you got to pull it off, the limitability of visibility, possibility for wasted space and stuff like that. But overall, the overall gross revenue should still reflect what you're seeing versus a full truckload and less than truckload. Less truckload is always going to pay more as long as you're able to secure the freight. And it's easier to get the minimum amount of freight to actually make the same amount that you'd make it on a full truckload, but you want to make sure that you can maximize it because that's the whole thing, more bang for the buck. Now, when we're talking about reefer trailers, feasibility, this is going to be highly challenging, even more than obviously dry van, because you're talking about perishables. It's highly challenging and generally not recommended for diverse LTL buildups to make a full truckload. The temperature control is the biggest hurdle because you got products at different temperatures. So each LTL might require a different temperature zone. And they do have sleeves, but most people don't carry those big sleeves that run across the whole curtain. But anyways, let me get back where I was at. Hell, I lost where I was at. So it might require different temperature zones, which a single reefer unit cannot provide. Mixing frozen foods with produce, which needs refrigeration but not freezing, is obviously impossible. Contamination risk, mixing food products can lead to a cross-contamination and odor transfer. That odor transfer, people don't take it serious. You get it somewhere and that shit don't smell like it's supposed to be smelling. That's the whole part of the whole package when you go to buy something at the grocery store. I don't need my tomatoes smelling like some damn dried ass fish. Okay. So that's the whole point behind that. Sanitation, maintaining specific cleanliness standards for different types of perishable goods. Hard to do because some stuff when you get done, you have to spray it out. That's what they call a trailer washout. And behind trailer washout, what if you were carrying, even if you did do a split load, if you're carrying something like I've literally carried formaldehyde and then turn around and go get produce, but you got to get that trailer washed out because there's always going to be some kind of resin left behind. You don't want that cross being a vector for the food and messing somebody up. Limited access. Now, rear door only loading. It's similar to the dry vans, obviously making it difficult to manage multiple stops. Got to unload everything and get it out. Strict time sensibility. Perishables goods are obviously the word perishable, often having tight delivery windows, making multi-spot stop LTL more prone to spoilage if it delays occur. Um, so best use cases is extremely limited. Um, that's the reason I don't mess with it. I mean, I know I keep telling everybody, flatbed, step deck, flatbed, step deck. And it's like I'm fucking talking to myself because it's so important. If you got that, you are in good shape. Um, Now, if you can find multiple LTL shipments, especially if you can build a contract with them, they all require the exact same temperature, highly unlikely. Like all frozen foods, all produce, for example, need to be about 38 degrees Fahrenheit. It might be feasible. However, these opportunities are extremely rare, and the risk reward offered just doesn't justify the effort. Reefers are best suited for dedicated temperature controlled FTLs and or consolidated FTLs of identical temperature freight. If you got somewhere that can actually do that. But if you do that, then you're not really getting paid no more because they're going to mark it out as an FTL and run you like that and not be considering it as an LTL at all. So the LTL to FTL strategy is a powerful tool, extremely powerful for maximizing revenue on flatbeds and step decks by leveraging their unique loading flexibility, ability to handle diverse freight. It demands a highly skilled dispatcher, precise planning, and effective communication, while the core concept of combining smaller shipments to create a full load is appealing. And it better be more than appealing. This is the way you need to be doing it if you can actually understand how this works. It's particularly its practical application to dry vans is more limited due to the loading constraints, and it is largely impractical for the reefer trailers due to the critical temperature control requirements. Now, for the right equipment and for in the right market, however, it's proven method to significantly boost your gross earnings beyond what a single straight load can offer. Oh, okay. That was a lot even for me. But anyways, that being said, you can see that that's the reason I push dry van, man, flatbed and step deck. They really do match out together. The dry van, because it's not going to be perishable, no big deal, but you still got the overall getting freight in and out. What if you get the place and all they can do is get their freight out? Now you're jacked, you have the front load in there. That's going to possibly be a logistics problem. But definitely with the reefer, you can actually make it do, but you really got to look at what you're doing with that. Temperature control, sanitation, the overall ability to get loads on and off if it's stacked in there differently, separation, cross contamination. So those factors have to be considered when you're actually dealing with that. But anyways, I'm going to leave it at this. This is what I was talking about taking a LTL, building it to a FTL, and then as it drops off, pick stuff up, mainly with a flatbed and step deck. Obviously, you can see how you do it with dry van and reefer, but I don't mess with it. So I don't have practicality of day in and day out of making making an LTL into an FTL. But that being said, I hope this was helpful. If you got comments, please send them down below. It can help other people as well. If you need to get a hold of me, contact information is below as well. I appreciate it. Hope this really did bless you. Hope you got something out of it to understand the load boards, dealing with direct shippers. Yeah, it's all a combined effort to get those FTLs, but you can literally take shorter LTLs, I'll hand it toward one direction and way exceed that given gross revenue. But always remember time sensibility, loading and unloading. So make sure all the paperwork stays in order, your constant line of communication so everybody understands where you're at in the given step. And remember those appointment times. If you can't make them because you're doing all this other stuff, now you got an underlying issue. So make sure when you're communicating to your broker, let them know the whole transparency of what's going on. Okay. But that being said, I appreciate everybody. Besides that, have a great day, and we'll move on to the next subject.